What is a bullet you dodged? One time I dated this guy, but we broke up, which was fine. Later I find out during the bath salts phase he bit his girlfriend's nose off. I'm glad I wasn't with him at the time, or it would have been me. Few years back when the wife and I were looking at buying houses, we had our hearts set on a certain home which, admittedly would have squeezed our budget too much, although, we could pull it off. We ended up finding another more suitable and affordable home. We later learned that the owner of the home we wanted left with all the chattel and fixtures he wasn't supposed to, leaving the home buyers screwed. They initiated a lawsuit, and suddenly within the next week, their car tires got slashed and someone attempted to set fire to their garage. Yikes. Sophomore year of college, friend of a friend had just returned from a road trip to SoCal. 9-10 hour drive, brought back some of what he claimed was authentic Mexican food. I was in the middle of some food microbiology courses and was overly suspicious of food I knew had been prepped, cooked point and handled well. So I asked him a few questions about when it was cooked, how it had been stored, etc. Hated his answers and declined. Warned my friend to stay away as well. He listened due to some horror stories I had related from class. The other 4 pigged out. 2 days later they were all suffering intense food poisoning symptoms. I'm not talking a one and done vomit session or a small case of diarrhea. Full on repeated rejections from both ends for a day plus, fever, chills, dehydration, some low level delirium. First few days they felt like they would die. Next few days they wished they would die to get over it. 3 or 4 were diagnosed with 2 different types of food poisoning. My friend and I tried to help out, but their apartment smelled like a sewage treatment plant and couldn't stand to be there for more than a few minutes at a time. Didn't stop at the gas station that I stop at every day for coffee in the morning yesterday. About the same time I stopped there a girl was shot and killed. Employee at the store when it was robbed. An ex, which went a little nutty after I broke it off with her. She'd camp in her car at the end of my old block, which was a dead-end road. She didn't know I moved out and was only scaring my old roommates. She later married a guy who looked so questionably like me that others in our circles called him Worm at my name because of his generic resemblance of myself. It was a wild summer that year. My grandmother came to pick me up from my preschool when I was 4 or 5 to take me to lunch. I didn't want to go because I was in the middle of an activity with my pals. She understood, so she went on her way and was dead in a car crash not 15 minutes later. If I went with her, there is a good chance I wouldn't be typing this. I don't know if that is a bullet dodged or just fate. It's been 35 years and I still miss her. She was such a good, sweet woman. I was sitting on a blanket in a park when I was about 16 years old, but I decided to relocate so that I could watch some guys playing frisbee. Not long after I moved, a huge branch snapped off the tree I was just under. If I hadn't moved my blanket, I would have been seriously injured or maybe even killed. The branch was as big as some trees. I used to be a massage therapist, but quit in early 2020 to become a software engineer. A few months later, lockdown happened and I suddenly found myself working remotely for a major company with ridiculous amounts of job security during one of the worst years in recent memory. I still deal with survivor's guilt over this, because I had a lot of friends who effectively lost their job last year. The lead massage therapist at my old job hated me because I treated my time there as a stepstone until I finished my degree. Even though I know it's not my fault, I feel bad knowing that she lost a ton of clientele and had to put her life at risk to make ends meet. I decided not to go watch the finish line for the Boston Marathon in 2013. I was only a few blocks away and decided to head into my dorm because the leaders had all finished at that point and I didn't feel it was worth it to go watch the rest. Less than 10 minutes later I started hearing sirens from my window and got a text from the girl I was dating at the time that they weren't letting her off the tee at Copley for some reason. If I had just kept walking straight down Boylston like I had originally planned, I probably would have gotten there just as the bombs went off. My fiance leaves me 3 months before the wedding. We spend 2 years trying to work things out, progressively fighting more and more. She starts treating me horribly, so we are hooking up. after drinking together, and she tells me to get her pregnant, so she doesn't have a choice of getting back together with me or not. I did not get her pregnant. About 2 weeks later I cut all ties with her over a huge fight. Find out a few months later that she had been seeing another guy for over a year and was now pregnant. So yeah, dodged a crazy A bullet. I spent a few years working for a retail liquidation outlet. While it was open to the general public, our biggest customers were vendors who would come in and buy the best stuff at the cheapest prices they could get, then turn around and sell the stuff on eBay for a profit. These folks could get real aggressive, especially on sale days. They'd fight to be first in line, and it wasn't unheard of for physical fights to break out between these people over popular or high-ticket items. While I was working there, I completed my college degree and ended up leaving for a higher paying and lower stress job in my field. Just a couple months after I left, I learned that one of the longtime vendor customers was banned from all of the company's retail locations for assaulting my replacement. Apparently this employee had brought a cart of name brand electronic items out of the stock room, which were claimed by customers before even making it to the shelves. The vendor in question got there just a moment too late and, on being told that there was no more stock of that item, grabbed the employee by the throat and tried to strangle them. There's no doubt in my mind that that could have been me if I'd stuck around. Some of those eBay people were just unhinged. Was very sick. Was home for my birthday. Parents wanted me to go to family doctor. I just wanted to get on the road to go home, and I was already in the process of getting checked out in the town I lived. They were pushing really hard to go to family doctor. It wouldn't take long, etc. I said fine and went. Got told I had cancer that day, no doubt, and hospitalized. Diagnosed with lymphoma not long after. The bullet I dodged. I didn't hear from a doctor in the town I lived for 3 months. Likely wouldn't have made it 3 months. When they finally called, I was on 3 rounds of chemo infusion. Hope this counts. At least, it is a narrowly avoided disaster. I've given this story before. But, years ago, when I was in middle school, my brother and I had bunk beds, and he had the top one, which was held up with metal bars. If you've seen Step Brothers, you can see where I'm going with this, except it's with metal bars instead of neat boxes. Well, since we lived in an old house in a country neighborhood, we occasionally got bed bugs. My bed got them especially badly, and it was even worse during the summer. Usually, I went to bed first, but since I was tired of getting bitten, I chose to stay up as long as I could. While my brother went to bed, he jumped on his bed, which then fell onto mine. It did not fall flat. Rather, the side that fell was where my head would be. I slept in a chair that night. I dated this girl for a while. She was cool, and like people do at some point, pretty early on, she asks, what age do you wanna be when you have kids? I said ideally like my early to mid 30s. I wanna have some nice one-on-one time just being married. She'd then say for me, I could have them at any time. Yeah, I know 10 years from now would be fine, or this year would be fine. I don't think much of it, but she would ask me on that question to me on a weekly basis, and I kept giving her the same answer. The relationship lasted long enough where we were going to have sex soon, and when we were talking about usual stuff like preferences etc, I said that I wanted to use a condom and she didn't want to show it, but I could tell this greatly bothered her. She kept saying stuff like it won't feel as good, and don't you trust me, and stuff like that. I didn't trust her with all her comments about having kids. I wasn't gonna do it without a condom. She broke up with me. She said it was because she'd met someone new. But I'm pretty sure me not budging on having kids at age 22 was a factor. Last I heard, this new guy got her pregnant, and her new boyfriend and her have both dropped out of college. I hope the best for them, but I'm sure I'm glad that it wasn't me. I work in a brunch kitchen, and we have a steam kettle, which is basically a very tall, thick metal bowl with a heating element under it, so we can fill it with water and poach eggs in it, cook our hollandaise and such. Last week on Wednesday I was setting things up in the morning before open, and all of a sudden the nozzle on the back of the steam kettle explodes, and there's steam filling the whole back of the kitchen and water all over the floor. Luckily I was standing about 20 feet away, but had I been standing over top of the steam kettle I would have likely been in the hospital with 3rd-degree burns on my face. There was a block of land on the edge of town we were very interested in. Large, in an historic area, has a creek running through it, already approved for a new house. We made offers, but kept getting knocked back. The place had been on the market for nearly 3 years, but he was holding out for magic number he had in his head. In the end, we gave up and bought elsewhere. The property sold for less than the magic number. 6 months later, we were hit with huge floods. Most of the property disappeared into the creek. So glad we dodged that one. I was driving home from work late one night. I noticed a nearby car meet was breaking up and some of the guys were heading my way. About halfway home on a straight section of road, I happened to glance in my rearview mirror and see a car coming up fast. I quickly scanned the road ahead and saw he was going to cross from lane 3 to lane 1, my lane, to go through a small gap in traffic. I decided to ease back to ensure he had room because I really don't want to get caught up in some crash tonight. I saw him start to cross lanes and was then obscured by a car ahead to my right. When he emerged from behind that car, he was sideways to me. He hit the barrier and spun out whilst I used all of my brakes. By the time I stopped, I was about 6 inches from where his oil and fluids had dumped out onto the road. By some miracle, the guy was completely fine. Asked me not to call the police and refused to share any details with me. Police did arrive and pretty much said, had I not started slowing when I did, chances are I would have been caught up in the crash. I have pictures and a video turned up on Instagram a while back. I was maybe 7 years old, playing in my neighborhood. Beautiful sunny day. Within sight of my house, a car stopped. Guy got out, asked for help, said I just had to put my foot on the brake so he could fix his car. He seemed like a nice man, and he started talking about how to hold the brake. I was focused on execution, if I could do it, and started to walk to his car. A neighbor yelled out their screen window, angrily asking what I was doing. Told me to go home. I didn't know why they were angry at me, but I ran home, and the guy took off. It wasn't until I was an adult that I even thought back on this and realized this was suspect. At the time, didn't even mention it to my parents, and neither did my neighbor. My naivete was breathtaking. 3-year relationship, should have ended it sooner, but I'm a sucker for guys that can pull out the tears, I guess. I was open about expectations, double income, no kids type relationship. Well, ex-BF could never hold a job for even a year and would just keep getting certifications for stuff. Worked for a few months, then quit. Bug spraying, insurance pyramid schemes / scamming old people, and truck driving, which I'm not sure if he stuck with it cause that was the last straw. He was traveling for work and already had trouble keeping in contact with me. I'd beg him to talk to me, and his response would be, "It's how I am, and I don't plan to change. How about I just quit my job and come back?" Which would have had him in massive debt to the truck people he trained with. I asked him what he planned to do as a job then, and how he'd keep a job. He responded, "I just need to work until you graduate and become a teacher." This a-hole wanted to just stay at home while I worked. I told him it was over, and then he tried to beg me to be friends with benefits. A bad divorce led me to being adopted. Turns out my BO dad was an avid drug user, and my BO mom and her kids are permanently disabled due to a carbon monoxide leak. Now, my adoptive parents weren't the best, but at least I didn't end up being raised in a party house with permanent brain damage or dead. 2 actually. The first one is sad. I overslept once in 2002 and missed a ride with my girlfriend to church. Her family was in a car accident that killed her, but her mom and sister survived. She was sitting in my usual seat of the car, back drivers, lucky to be alive, but forever troubled by the what if. Secondly, point a literal bullet. I was prospecting in a motorcycle club which I will not name. I was at the clubhouse drinking with all the guys when another club's member stopped in to visit. It was cool at first. The guy was funny, but loud and boisterous. He decided to argue with my would-be future club's president over what I'll probably never know and don't care. A shootout broke out in the clubhouse. The visitor was running out the front door backwards, almost, and shooting in my general direction. At the bar, I was armed with a concealed carry permit and Springfield pistol. I unholstered, found cover and waited until I saw fit to exit a side door. I never shot. A member was hit in the butt cheek and the visiting fellow was hit in the arm. There was no hospital visit and no police involvement. I spoke to the president the next day and said it wasn't for me, and he respected my wishes, albeit a bit angry. It's Timișoara, Romania. December 17th, 1989. I'm with thousands of street protesters marching. During an unusually hot December afternoon, outside temperature was close to 18°C, whereas ordinarily this would be cold enough to keep you indoors. Some wave flags with the communist symbol removed from the yellow center of the tricolor flag. Everyone is chanting Jos Soescu, down with Soescu. At this point, we are going from the Opera Square to Liberty Plaza. From that plaza, there's a street going past Continental Hotel to the Communist Party building. Streetcar rails were going through the middle. Not anymore. About 150 meters away, I see an amphibious armored transporter, TAB in the Romanian army. In the middle of the street were the streetcar railways. No streetcars were running that afternoon. I'm looking straight at it, and the officer, they had special hats, staring through binoculars, gets down into the TAB. The turret hatch closing. BTW. These details, like any other brush with death, are etched into my brain. Back then, TABs were equipped with 14.5mm guns. I was familiar with TABs, having been inside several while serving in the 90th Infantry Regiment in nearby Lugoj, just 5 years prior. Anyway, the 14.5mm gun lowers straight after the turret hatch closes. At that point, I see a tiny flash of light at the front of the TAB gun. I turn to my then wife, while grabbing her right hand. We are running in zigzag. Don't stop until I tell you to, and I didn't stop running, going on side streets, away from Continental Hotel, until I no longer heard gunfire. Timișoara is divided by the River Bega. As we were going home, and it was getting dark, we had to cross to the other side. The Michelangelo Bridge was blocked by the military, so we kept going upstream. Next bridge, blocked. All of them were. We just didn't think about it. Next bridge. We're beginning to realize we're toast, probably about to get arrested. Suddenly I make eye contact with my former platoon commander. No insignia, just soldier outfit. He recognizes me. Let them pass, he says. We made it home, safe and sound. If anyone reading this knows LT Duda, my gratitude. That day, Timișoara lost 70 of its citizens to gunfire. Hundreds were arrested in Liberty Plaza and the Opera Square, including some of my friends. I decided to leave Romania for good on January 8, 1990. Soescu and his wife were executed on Christmas Day, 1989, by the Romanian army.